In a small, secluded town, nestled between thick woods and a winding river, there stood an old tavern called the Last Call. The tavern had been around for as long as anyone could remember, with its weathered wooden sign creaking in the wind and a dim, flickering lantern that barely illuminated the narrow, cobblestone path leading to its entrance. The locals knew better than to venture there after dark, for strange things were said to happen within its walls. One rainy autumn evening, a man named Jake found himself stranded in the town. His car had broken down miles from anywhere, and the only sign of civilization was the faint glow of the last call in the distance. With no other options, he pulled his jacket tight against the biting wind and headed towards the tavern. The door creaked loudly as Jake pushed it open, and a wave of musty, stale air greeted him. Inside, the tavern was nearly empty, save for a few old men huddled in the corner, nursing their drinks and murmuring in low voices. The bartender, a gaunt figure with hollow eyes, watched Jake with an unnerving intensity. Jake approached the bar, his footsteps echoing in the silent room. "Just a beer," he said, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling that crept up his spine. The bartender nodded without a word and reached for a dusty bottle from beneath the counter. As Jake took a sip, he noticed something strange about the men in the corner. Their skin was pale and drawn tight over their bones, and their eyes were sunken, as if they hadn't slept in years. He quickly looked away, focusing instead on the crackling fire in the hearth. "New around here?" The bartender finally spoke, his voice low and gravelly. I'm just passing through," Jake replied, trying to sound casual. "My car broke down a few miles back." The bartender's eyes flickered with something Jake couldn't quite place. Pity, perhaps? Or was it fear? Before Jake could ask, the door to the tavern swung open with a loud bang, and a gust of wind extinguished the few candles that provided light. The room was plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of the dying fire. "He's here," one of the old men whispered, his voice trembling. Jake's heart raced as he turned towards the door, but all he could see was a shadowy figure standing just inside the entrance. The figure moved slowly, deliberately, as if it were searching for something, or someone. What's going on?" Jake demanded, his voice shaking. The bartender didn't answer. Instead, he reached under the counter and pulled out an old leather-bound book. He opened it to a page marked with a black ribbon, his hands trembling as he began to read aloud in a language that Jake didn't recognize. The shadowy figure stepped closer, and Jake could feel the air grow colder with each passing second. The old men in the corner started to chant softly, their voices rising and falling in an eerie rhythm. Panicked, Jake tried to move, but his feet felt like they were rooted to the floor. The shadow was almost upon him, and he could see its eyes, black, empty voids that seemed to suck the light from the room. The bartender's voice grew louder, more desperate, but it was too late. The shadow reached out with an impossibly long arm, its fingers brushing against Jake's chest. He felt the searing pain as if his very soul was being ripped from his body. With a final agonizing scream, Jake collapsed to the floor. The shadow loomed over him for a moment before slowly retreating back into the darkness. The room fell silent once more. The only sound was the soft crackle of the dying fire. The old men resumed their murmured conversation as if nothing had happened. The bartender closed the book, his hands steady once more. He then glanced at Jake's lifeless body, then turned to the door, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to wander in. At the Last Call Tavern, the drinks were always on the house, for those who never left.